not a civil war, as you know, some reports are trying to characterize it and define it. This is a war of self-defense. For us, this is an external aggression. Actually, the militia acts as a proxy for foreign powers who actually use the militia to implement their agenda and to wage this war on their behalf, a war for self-defense. The very country that they all, or we as Sudanese, we all belong to, is at an existential threat. Actually, this is not a civil war, as you know, some reports are trying to characterize it and define it. This is a war of self-defense imposed on the army of the Sudanese army and the Sudanese people, who are obliged actually to defend their country and their land against an external aggression. So for us, this is an external aggression. Actually, the militia acts as a proxy for foreign powers who actually use the militia to implement their agenda and to wage this war on their behalf. That very fact of the Sudanese people now realizing that this is an external aggression has resulted in the Sudanese people mobilize and around their army and join the fight to defend their land and to defend their country. And so, again, this is a war for self-defense. The very country that they all, or we as Sudanese, we all belong to, is at an existential threat by this war. So this is how we see this war and how we define it. Coming to your question, yes, today, 15th of April, marks the second anniversary of this war. It has been 2 years, 2 years of aggression, actually, 2 years of massacres, mass killings, and genocide being committed by this militia against the specific ethnic groups in the country, as evidenced by the reports of the United Nations, the United States, and others. It has been 2 years of systematic sexual violence, mass rape of women and girls, including children among them, young children as young as 1 year old, as reported a couple of weeks ago by UNICEF. It has been 2 years of systematic looting and destruction of infrastructure. So I mean the scale and the nature of the misery that the Sudanese people have seen in these 2 years at the hands of this terrorist militia are unprecedented, and we have never gone through such a thing before. So it has been 2 years, definitely, but actually we, as what is the current situation, the army, the militia is on continuous retreat, as the army actually makes significant advances by recapturing most of the areas who had fallen before under the control of the militia. With the advances the army now is making on the ground by recapturing these areas, actually the government is embarking on restoring services back to normal. People are returning in masses to their homes. It has been the case when this militia actually appears in any area, people just flee for their life, for their, for their safety, for everything that is dear to them. They just flee. Now, actually, when these areas are recaptured by the army, people are coming back in masses, back to their homes. And has been the case in the central areas of Sudan, the Jazeera state, whose capital is Madani city. And also that has been the case in Khartoum. Khartoum has been liberated very recently. And now people are coming back to Khartoum again to their homes, and the government is working very hard to restore the services and make life actually easy to those who are coming back. But at the same time, the militia is still wreaking havoc on other parts of the country. In Darfur, for example, around Al-Fashir city, which is the capital of North Darfur, the militia is attacking the innocent civilians, those who are residents of the IDP camp, the internally displaced persons camp, which is near Al-Fashir. So far, in less than 4 days, 450 people have been killed, mostly women and children, and including among them 9 humanitarian workers. So, I mean, you have a very stark contrast between what is going on under the areas controlled by the government and the army, where there are serious attempts to restore services and bringing back life to normalcy, and what is going on in these areas where the RSF is present. Wherever they go, they are followed by death, destruction, sexual violence, and all sorts of atrocities. Unfortunately, this militia wouldn't have been able to continue these atrocities without the backing and the support that it is getting from external powers in the region, mainly the United Arab Emirates. Actually, they are supplying this militia with arms, with mercenaries, with political influence. They are supporting them, and they are complicit in all these crimes. Actually, the militia now is committing in Sudan, whether it is in the Darfur or in other places around the country. So this is the current situation now. What is next for us is a two-pronged plan. First of all is to press on with the same pace of these military advances until the whole country is liberated. This is one part of it. And the second part of this plan is to start the new phase of reconstruction in the liberated areas. And here, I guess we believe that there is a huge potential for our relations with India. In this phase of reconstruction, we believe this is where actually we can have much cooperation, actually, whether it is between the two governments or the private sectors in the two countries. We believe there are huge opportunities for reconstruction. Actually, when this process starts, we anticipate very, very soon, hopefully. Well, we actually very much appreciate this humanitarian assistance provided by the Indian government. And it is not only this latest shipment which was received last month in Port Sudan. Right after the breakout of the war, the Indian government actually supplied 25 tons of urgent medicines to Sudan by a special Air Force flight, actually, which went and landed in Port Sudan. That was very much needed at the time, and we very much appreciate that from the side of the Indian government. This was followed actually by this second shipment, which was received last month, which actually included cancer medicines as well. This is very much needed. And we are in the process also of receiving very generous also assistance in terms of hemodialysis machines, like 20 machines that we are in the process of receiving now from the Indian government. This will help actually those patients with kidney failure. It is very important for them. As you know, I mean, the infrastructure has been hit hard by the militia as part of their deliberate campaign to destroy all the infrastructure in the country. So around 80% of the hospitals have gone out of services. And we have a considerable number of patients who are suffering from kidney failure, who didn't have access now to these machines. It is life-saving for them. So this is very much appreciated. We are also expecting to receive a considerable number of artificial limbs also from the government of India. We very much appreciate this and thank the Indian government for this generous assistance. So we are working actually closely with the Indian government. And let me here also mention a very good aspect of this support. The Indian embassy has remained open and running in Port Sudan. India is among those countries who have opted to leave their embassy open despite everything. And the embassy, by the way, plays a very important role in issuing visas to the patients. India is one of the favorite destinations for medical treatment for the Sudanese people. So the Indian embassy in Sudan also is playing a very good role by issuing visas to the patients who are coming, and there is a good number of patients coming from Sudan to India for medical treatment. So this is also another aspect of the support that we thank the Indian government for, and of course we look forward actually to even more collaboration in these areas, whether it is in the health sector or the humanitarian or what. I mean, we believe that as long as there is a good political will between the two countries, everything is possible. And as I said, the potential for the relationship is huge. As regards the evacuation operation, that was another testimony for the close cooperation also between the two governments. The Indian government, actually immediately after the eruption of the war, decided to evacuate the Indian community, which is a large community in Sudan. Those are people who settled there for a long time, and they are Sudanese Indians, actually. This is how they see themselves. And that operation actually involved evacuating, thousands of Indian Sudanese people by air and by sea to Jeddah and then to India. Despite the difficult circumstances at the time of this evacuation, because that was just immediately after the eruption of the war, but nevertheless the army cooperated with the Indian government and gave priority actually on the air bases to receive the flights coming from India to evacuate these, and as well in Port Sudan by the sea ships actually from Port Sudan to Jeddah. So I don't think many have remained actually now in Sudan, but as I have heard that some of them have returned back now to Sudan after the advances the army has made and recapturing of some areas. Some of them prefer to go back and to maintain actually their livelihood there in Sudan. So some of them are back now in Sudan. They think now things are getting better, and especially after the army has recaptured these areas back from the militia. So this is a situation as regards the Indian community now in Sudan.
What role do you think of countries like Saudi Arabia and United States and also international organizations like the United Nations playing in the conflict since it has been 2 years now?
Well, we very much appreciate the role played actually by these two countries in particular, especially at the beginning of the war. We appreciate their endeavor actually to resolve this conflict when it started peacefully. But the events actually unfolded since then have exposed the real nature and revealed the true face of this militia. They are not interested in peace. They don't even comprehend what a peace process entails, what a humanitarian corridor means, what protection of civilians requires. It is just beyond their comprehension. This militia is too brutal to understand these concepts. It's too ruthless. We have come to the conclusion that this militia is not interested in peace. Our message actually to the international community and to those who are interested in finding a solution is that we have to call the spade a spade. We have, first of all, we believe the most important factor that keeps prolonging this war is the foreign involvement, and in particular the involvement of the United Arab Emirates. We believe that without the support the United Arab Emirates is giving to the militia, this war wouldn't have actually continued this long. So for those who are serious actually in finding a resolution to this war, the first thing is to mount more pressure on the United Arab Emirates to stop its support to this militia. Second, I think we need to enforce the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2736, which demanded actually the militia to stop its siege of Al-Fashir and actually to stop targeting the civilians there. That resolution was issued last year, but unfortunately had not been enforced. And now people are watching what is going on. The militia is attacking, the innocent civilians are committing genocide, and this is still going on. The third thing, we believe that this militia should be designated a terrorist group. This is very important and very vital, actually, to us, again, to call a spade a spade. The third thing, the fourth element in our message to the international community is that we have submitted a roadmap to the United Nations Secretary General. We believe that that roadmap actually is very comprehensive. It shows what is needed actually to be done in order to have a ceasefire or to have a peaceful resolution to the conflict. But we very much stick to that roadmap which we submitted, and we are happy to discuss this roadmap with any country, with any organization, with any body that believes this can lead to a lasting peace in the country, and we are open to that.